All right, multiplying decimals. Today's going to be pretty straightforward, and we're also going to talk about circumference of a circle. Circumference is the same as perimeter, which just means around the outside. Okay? And in order to get that, we just multiply. That's why they put that in this lesson. So when you were multiplying decimals, you just multiply them as though they were whole numbers, and then do what? You guys already know this? Count how many places are behind the decimal and put your decimal that far into your answer. Okay? Do you just multiply them like they were regular decimals, and then however many places are behind your problem, or behind the decimals in your problem, or how many go behind the decimal in your answer. So for example, if we have 0.79 times 0.9 times 0.7, if you know what 9 times 7 is, and you don't even have to work this one out, you can just be like, it's 63. There's two spots behind the decimal point, the 7 and the 9, and so we put both 6 and 3 behind that decimal point. Okay? So here's our first problem on the back. 15.9 times 0.62. We don't need to worry about adding a 0 after the 62 because we don't have to line up our places when we multiply. So when we work that out, we would just set it up like a normal multiplication problem, work it out. Remember to add your placeholder 0 down here. How many places are behind our decimal points in this problem? 3. So we put 3 in the answer. If you're doing this on your calculator, you need to make sure that you get your decimals and your signs correct. Here's our next one, 0.648 times 0.5. Evidently, I did not put this one on your paper.
324.
Perfect. How many places are behind the decimal point in this problem?
4.
4. So how many decimals or places are there going to be in our answer?
3.
4. Good answer. That is exactly correct.
0 doesn't do anything, so.
No, the 0 doesn't do anything, but we got 3 here that are behind the decimal place, and 1 here behind the decimal place, and 3 and 1, so we need to do 4 here, even though the 0 doesn't do anything.
We have to put the 0?
Mm-hmm.
So our homework's going to count wrong if we don't?
Most likely.
Okay. Good to know.
Just like when we were adding, we can estimate by rounding these to the nearest whole number. So 5.3 and 4.2, we would round to 5 and 4. So what's 5 times 4? So your answer should be about 20. Oh, that one was on the back of your page. Work that out, I mean. Stop clicking your pen. Next one, 32 and 3/10 and 1 and 9/10. How many places are behind decimal points in this problem? 2. So how many decimal points are going to be in your answer? 2. I wrote my problem down wrong.
6137.
If we were going to estimate, what would we round this to? 32 and 2. What is 32 times 2?
30.
Close. Not 34, but 64. 64. 32 doubled would be 64, which is close to 61.37. When we multiply by tens, or powers of tens as they're called, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, and so on, when we have a decimal, we can just move that decimal place. So when we multiply by 10, 100, 1,000, or 10,000, we just move that decimal place to the right, however many zeros that you have. So if you're multiplying by 10, we move it to the right 1 spot. If we're multiplying by 100, we move it to the right 2 spots. However many zeros you have, or how many places you move that decimal point, okay? The rest of the number just stays the same, and we just slide the decimal point over. So 0.5 times 100, we would move this 2 places. Make sure you add that 0 in front of the decimal place to give you 50. When we are multiplying by powers of 10 that are smaller than 10, so we're talking about 0.1, 0.01, 0.001, that makes your number smaller, so instead of moving our decimal point to the right, we just move it to the left. Okie dokie, boys? Feel like you were really tracking till that moment right there. Okay.
I'm not tracking at all.
Yeah, whatever. So we move it to the left. So if we start with 0.06 and we multiply that times 0.01, we are going to move it to the left, the same number of places as there are decimal points. So here we have places behind the decimal points are 2, so we're going to go 1, 2. That's our new number. So, using that information, I think this is on the back of your page. Work out this problem. Just kidding. No,
Okay, okay, because there's 2 decimals, why do you go 2 places here?
That's just what you do.
Okay.
Just speak that. That's the rule. However many places are behind the decimal point in your problem, or how many you put in your answer. This one has 3 behind the decimal point, so you put 3 in the answer.
Okay.
So you just multiply them like regular multiplication and put that
Got
in.
it. Okay.
I don't know why.
Okay.
Just because.
Okay.
Just because. Alright, so I did not put this one on the back of your page, but let's look at it. If we're multiplying by 100, how many places am I moving that decimal? 2. To the right or the left, Blake?
Right.
2 to the right. So I'm going this way. So my answer.
There are 2 zeros and 100. You move the decimal place 2 places to the right.
Okay.
All right.
So my answer becomes 343 5/100.
Okay, you probably already discussed this. Sorry, I had a meeting this morning. So how do you know if you're going to the left or to the right?
If your number is bigger than 1, on this side here, if your number is bigger than 1,
Okay.
you move it however many decimal points are behind. If your number is smaller than 1, then we move it to the left. Yep.
Okay. All right.
However many places.
Clear as mud.
It's fine. It's good. So here is an example that also is not on the back of your paper. Imagine that. We're multiplying by 10. Oh, because I already gave you the answer. Multiplying by 10, so we move that decimal point how many places? Just one place. So if we multiply by 100, we're moving it how many places? 2. So from our original number, we move it over 2 places and we end up with 7,654. If we multiply by 100,000, how many zeros are here? So we need to move this decimal point 5 places. After 3, I run out of room or out of numbers, so I start adding zeros. After I add 2 zeros, then that's where my decimal point goes, okay? So however many zeros you have. Blake, keep your eyes open. Questions, Mason? You're crumpling up your forehead. All right.
Wait.
Don't erase yet. It's okay. Multiplying decimals. So now we're getting smaller. We're multiplying by less than 1. So instead of making our number bigger, we make our number smaller, which means we're moving our decimal point to the left. So how many numbers or how many places are to the right of this decimal point? 2. So we move it 2 places to the left. We do that. We have to add some placeholder zeros in there. Remember, you need 1 in front of your decimal. Then you'll need 1 before your numbers. So we're moving it 2 places to the left, and we're adding some placeholder zeros. So this one is on your paper. 58 times 100. How many places am I moving my decimal point? 2 to the right or left? To the left. So my new answer is going to be 0.581.
And do you have to have the 0 or no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Have to have the 0 in front of your decimal point. Here's our next one. How many numbers are behind the decimal point and what we're multiplying by? 1. So how many places am I moving my decimal? 1 to the left or right? To the left.
85, 62.4.
So 8,562 and 4/10. Our final one, we're multiplying by 100. Are we moving left or right? Right, because this number is bigger than 1. So we're making our number bigger. We're moving our decimal point to the right. How many places am I moving it? So my new number is 2,410 and 6/10.
But you don't have to put the 0 there after the 6.
Right.
Okay.
Blake, you need to stay awake. Please and thank you. So, on the bottom of the first column is this problem where we substitute in a value for our variable 7 times y. If y equals negative 0.028 or 28 thousandths. So essentially, what am I doing in this problem? Multiplying these two numbers. When I set this up to multiply, pretend like I'm not using my calculator. And I'm going to put my 0.028 on top and my 7 on bottom. The reason is because the more digits you have should go on top. It makes your multiplication quicker. So 28 times 7 gives me 196. I multiply that just as if it were a whole number. How many numbers are behind my decimal? 3. So I start at the end of my answer, come over 3. I need to put a 0 in front of my decimal point. What else do I need here?
Negative.
A negative sign. Oop, finally, we're going to talk about the circumference of a circle. On the front of your page, under the vocabulary section, it talks about this vocabulary. The distance around a polygon is its perimeter. Remember, a polygon is just a shape, the distance around it. But in a circle, the distance around the circle, that is still the perimeter. We just give it a special name of the circumference. Okay? The circumference of the circle is the distance around it, and that is related to or depends upon the radius of the diameter of the circle, where the radius and diameter are the middle length. So the radius is from the center point to the edge. Diameter is all the way across the middle of the circle. Okay? So the radius is part of the way through this, or halfway. In order to use that information to find our circumference, we say the circumference is 2 times pi times the radius. What is pi? 3. Oh, look at you go. 3.14 is what we generally rounded to. If you use the diameter, you can leave off the 2. Why? Anybody know why?
You don't need to.
Because you don't need the 2, but why?
Because it's all the way across.
It's all the way across. The radius is halfway across, right? So if we double the radius, that's going to equal the diameter. So if you're using the diameter to find circumference, we can just take the diameter times pi. Okay? So 2 times the radius times pi, or diameter times pi. Pi is also a fraction. That fraction is 22 over 7. When we reduce 22 over 7 down, it becomes 3.1459 blah blah on and never ending. And that's why it is an irrational number that goes on forever. If you want an exact answer, you can just leave the symbol for pi in your answer. And some of your homework will ask you for an exact answer, meaning they do not want you to multiply it times 3.14 because that is an estimated answer. Okay? So if it asks you, we'll talk about that in a second. So find the circumference of a circle whose radius is 4 inches. This is on the back of your paper. So what I like to do, because I like to write out things, is say that circumference. I have the radius here, so I know I need to take 2 times the radius times pi. Then I substitute in the information that I know. The circumference is 2 times the radius. Do I have that information? It is 4 times pi. What is 2 times 4? So the circumference is 8 pi. If they wish for an exact answer, that is what you put. That is the exact answer for this. You do not have to finish working that out. 8 pi inches. Blake, I don't want to have to ask you to wake up again. Okay? It's the last time. Now, if they ask you for an estimate, we replace that pi symbol with 3.14. When we do that, we just take 8 times 3.14, and we get 25.12. 2 decimals and 3.14, so 2 decimal places in my answer.
So in what job, career, do they use this?
You would use it a lot if you were an architect or
That's what I,
contractor or what?
Building circles.
If you built circles of any kind, yeah, absolutely. Farmers, lots of times, like if they're figuring their bushel per acre, they need to find how much is in their circle, how many acres they cover.
Pivot.
Pivot, right? Yep.
because I'm gonna have to say.
Yeah, right? If I were not a math
in
teacher.
my life, yeah.
Right. I did use it once because I painted a mural of a baseball on a wall,
Okay.
and I had to find the circumference of what I wanted the baseball to be if I needed it to be.
Okay.
So, next example, we are finding the circumference of a circle that has with a radius of 9.1 yards. So again, we're dealing with our radius, so we need to have the 2 in our equation. We need to double that information. Substitute our information in. When I take 2 times 9.1, I end up with what? 18.2. Oh, and then they obviously already have substituted in there next. So 18.2 pi would be our exact answer. Then we substitute in 3.14. And we end up with 57.148 yards. Lots of times, and I notice that this is not showing this right now, but the difference between these two answers is on this one, we would write C equals 18.2 pi. And on this one, we would write C, and we'd put little approximations because it is not exactly. We would put some bacon between those two because bacon makes us all happy. So if for some reason they're not doing that here, but if it's an exact answer, you use straight equal signs. If it's an approximation where we've rounded something, we use bacon. Thanks, Austin. I'll never think of it the same. Last question. Jose Severos, an electrician for the Central Power and Light, worked 40 hours last week. Calculate his pay before taxes if his hourly wage is $13.88. How do I set this up? What do I need to do?
1388 times 40.
1388 times 40. Not all of us can be, yeah. Bummer. How many decimal points are in our problem? 2. How many decimal points are in our answer? I carried an extra. I ended up with a $600 he was going to make. Poor guy. $555.20 that week. Well, what I'm saying is if you only work 40 hours, it's not bad.
What 40 hours?
Questions. Your assignment is online. Yes, you may use your calculators. Do not Google answers. Use your calculators to find answers. You need to practice using calculators, putting the decimal spot in the right spot.